There stood Snortius the First over the defeated beast. The battle was won. The great horned creature had been killed. Snortius made sure to give his respects to the dead. A spender snot and fodderers. They died doing what they loved, being expendable fodder. As Snortius spoke grandly about the fallen snotlings, Pogchomp the attack squig was already helping himself to the dead greenskins. He chewed loudly as Snortius delivered his brief but solemn eulogy. "All right, let's go." The Snot Boss set about dragging his prize back to Snotantinople. He was pleased that he actually had enough snotlings with him this time, that he didn't need to engage in the hard drudgery work himself. Snortius spent his time imagining what he would do with those fabulous horns from the beast. A great pokey stick topped with that horn would be the best pokey stick Snotopia had ever seen. As Snortius was daydreaming about putting a stabby bit on the end of a stick, when the stabby bit was nearly as tall as he was, the mob emerged from the woods with their prize. He thought he ought to get Snotbo some proper gear. He was still using little Snot gear, and he didn't want any armor. Maybe he could give Snotbo a bit of this creature's hide as a cloak. He could paint it purple. What else? Maybe Snotbo could have a bunch of commando snots under his command. Ideas continued to swarm in Snortius's head as they approached the walls of Snotantinople. But Snortius could sense that something was wrong. As they entered the city, he saw that there were squigs everywhere. They had broken out of the pens and were running amok, attacking snotlings and generally causing mayhem. Snortius began shouting at the panicking snots and getting them to gather up the escaped squigs. As they started to set things right, the mutant snotling came across the grot he had entrusted with managing the squig farms. Stinky was running about with armfuls of meat squigs when he saw Snortius. "Oh, hello, Snortius. Sorry about the mess. I thought that the squigs look a bit cramped in their little pens, so I thought I'd let them out for a bit and let them stretch their legs a bit. And, well, things got a bit out of hand, North." "I had not expected much. Yet you're still disappointing me, Stinky." "Ow! Get these squigs back in their pens, or I'm feeding you the Pogchomp." "Right, Snortius. Sorry, boss. I did a bad job." This was a dark day in Snotantinople. But the situation was remedied through Snortius's efforts, and with the help of Pogchomp, who was the largest amongst the squigs. The other squigs instinctively followed the largest and fiercest among them, as they were herded back to their pens. The Brain, meanwhile, had been working with Pegleg on developing new weapons for Snotopia, but not much progress was made before Stinky's mishap occurred. Then there was a bit of a disruption. With everything settled, Snortius put the populace of Snotantinople to work. He wanted a fine new pokey stick made with the big horn from the beast. He had 2 horns, and there was no sense in wasting one of them. But who else should get the big spear? Stinky and DeBrain hadn't proven themselves yet, and Snotbo was stealthy. A big Zoggoth spear wasn't a good fit for him. Tree Climber. He would be granted the other horn pokey stick. But Snotbo would not be left without reward. The creature's hide was cut up and made into cloaks for Snotbo and his commando snots that he hand-selected. Redbrain 2, Punchin' Bag, and Steve were all rewarded for their survival with their own tiny purple cloaks. Snortius stood proudly with his stick He felt powerful, almost like he could poke Gork or Mork themselves. Filled with a new sense of energy and might, Snortius was suddenly struck with inspiration. We need to bravely strike out into the world. We need conquest for Snotantinople. We need to expand the empire of Snotopia. The Snotlings cheered their large mutant boss. I want to build us a raft. Then we goes off onto the river and see what we sees, float where we floats, and kill what we kills. Another cheer arose from the Snots, and they began to work. Under the supervision of Snortius, Debrain, and Pegleg, things moved quickly. Snortius now had access to many Snotlings to throw at problems that required large amounts of labor. So all of the work he set them to was completed rapidly. It wasn't long before Snotopia had constructed the first of its mighty navy. It was a simple thing. Large logs wrapped securely with vines. As the greenskins labored away, Snortius pondered who he would take with him on this glorious journey. It was likely to be dangerous. He would, of course, bring Snotbow Tree Climber and Snotbow's 3 tiny Snotling commandos. Stinky and Debrain should come along as well. Snortius needed to test their mettle and see if they could prove their green. Also, keeping an eye on Stinky seemed like a good idea. Snortius clapped the somewhat dull Grot on the shoulder. Prove yourself, Stinky, or I'll crump ya. You got it, Snortius. I'll do me best. Snortius then gathered a few more Snots that had freshly popped out of the ground. They needed to get out into the world and see things and fight and kill and take hits that would otherwise injure the glorious personage of Snortius I. And so they placed the raft along with their supplies and paddles, and put it into the irrigation ditch, and pulled it along a line out to the great river. All of the Grots and Snotlings piled on, along with the Squigs, Pogchomp, and Squigarlicus. And they were off to adventure floating down the river. Stinky spoke up. So, not to alarm anyone, but won't it be really hard and take a long time for us to paddle back up the river back to Snotantinople? The various greenskins just sort of looked at each other as they clearly had not considered such a possibility. Regardless, it was too late to head back now. The Snotlings set about paddling as hard as they could to avoid the various rocks and dangers of the great river. They certainly didn't want to fall in and risk being devoured by one of the river monsters. But the voyage proved to be fairly pleasant. There wasn't a lot of annoying foot slogging, and the sky was bright and blue. Snortius stood proudly on his raft and breathed in deeply with satisfaction. Suddenly, the moment was broken as Snotbow pointed to the sky. "Boys, look!" Up from the forest rose a single column of thick black smoke. "What is that? Pull the raft over. I want to go take a look." The Gretchen and Snotlings paddled the raft over to the shallows before they hauled their vessel onto the bank. Snortius and the others crept up a small hill to get a look down below, and then they saw it. It was the old bug nest, the creatures that had been one of the chief rivals to Snotopia in its early days. Now it was burning. 4 creatures stood around the nest. They were big, much bigger than even Snortius, and they carried strange-looking shooters. Shooters was the word. Those were shooters. Three seemed to be casually talking to each other. The burnt-out husks of the bugs were laying around everywhere. A fourth one carried... what was it? A burner. Yes, that was what it was called. A burner. And that tall, two-legged creature with the burner was pouring fire down the entrance to the bug nest. They were finally here. The Gits who spoke on the squawk box. They had arrived with their enormous size and powerful weapons. Now, the very survival of Snot-Tantanople was at stake. No man do they call me, my mother and my father, and all my comrades as well. Thank you all for listening to the latest episode of Growing the Tribe. If you like what you heard, please leave a like and comment so that heavily armed humies don't show up at your Stone Age civilization. If you are not yet subscribed, please do so in order to hear more stories about the adventures of small green people. If you would like to support me, you can do so via PayPal or Patreon. Both of those links will be below. And if you have no idea what's going on, you can check out the Growing the Tribe playlist, which should be appearing on screen right now. Thank you all very much. No Man out.